This week, the government of Ghana cancelled the PDS contract with ECG. This was a contract that came about as part of arrangements with the MCC of the United States, of a compact, which was to help improve the power sector of Ghana. There was a lot of money attached to it, and the cancellation had financial implications on Ghana. We've heard from the government about how this all came to be. Today we get the opportunity to get even more context, even more information about the events that led to the cancellation of the PDS contract and the withdrawal of $190 million originally earmarked for the electricity distribution sector as part of the compact. To help us understand this, we're honored to have the press attaché from the United States Embassy. Naomi, how nice to see you. Thank you for speaking to us.
And thank you, Kojo, so much for coming down to speak with us.
All right. So perhaps we'll start from the statement that the American government issued on Tuesday. And this statement referred to the decision made by the government of Ghana to cancel the PDS contract, or terminate the PDS contract. And I would like to quote from it so we can start our conversation from there. It said, and I quote, "The United States of America notes this decision with regret. Based upon the conclusions of the independent forensic investigation, the U.S. position is that the transfer of operations, maintenance, and management of the Southern Distribution Network to the private concessionaire on March 1, 2019 was valid, and therefore the termination is unwarranted." So clearly the United States position on what to do about PDS was completely opposite to the Ghanaian government's position. How did the meeting end? The meeting last week in Washington, where the Ghanaian government sent a delegation to discuss this very matter with the MCC. How did that meeting end? And why does the statement say that the United States is noting this decision with regret? Was there a different conclusion at that meeting?
Sure. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Kojo, for coming down and talking with me about this very, very important topic. And you know, the reason why we reached out to you to chat was because, you know, this has been at the forefront of the media for this week. It's been quite a week, right? And we noticed that the media reporting, while you guys had some source documents that you were basing your reporting on, it lacked context. I think you were given, you know, these source documents without background. And I just wanted to share some background with you, not to point blame, not to point any fingers or to place blame, but to give more background for you, so for reporting purposes, and also to help explain a little bit to the Ghanaian public. So the source documents that I referred to were the letters that have been reported on in the media. And that was an internal bilateral work product. What I mean by that is that both sides came together for the past 13 weeks when this first became an issue back in July. MCC and the Ministry of Finance specifically were working diligently and very hard to make this concession work, because this is a very important part of the compact. And so they got together and they came up with a way forward, a pre-negotiated way forward. And that's normal in negotiations. Both sides comes together and they put their minds together to try to move forward and to have a positive outcome. So the letter that was published by, or sourced by the news here in Ghana, was referring to a pre-negotiated outcome that was presented by the Ministry of Finance and considered by MCC. And they collaborated together and they came up with the final product that you did see and others did see. And after that, when a decision or a document was drafted together, that document went to the final decision makers, because that's, you know, it's normal for negotiation. You come together, you figure out a way forward, and then you move it forward to the final decision makers. And unfortunately, when it got to that point, the government of Ghana decided to go to a different direction, And as you noted in your opening preamble, with our statement, we definitely noted with regret that the government of Ghana made that decision. And as such, as a result, the $190 million that was contingent on a successful concession was taken back. And so, but I do want to make one point, if I may, Kojo, before we move on. The $190 million, that wasn't as a reward for, making the concession happen, no. That $190 million was contingent upon a successful compact. And that $190 million did not go to the concessionaire. That was for infrastructure for the energy sector here in Ghana. So that would be that would be like IT infrastructure, all the infrastructure that is a part of the energy sector. So I just wanted to make that clear for the viewers.
I want to check something that you said. You mentioned that what was laid out in the letter from the MCC, and I'm assuming you're speaking of the letter dated October 18.
Correct.
Which had the heading Principles and Action Steps to Move Forward on the Ghana Power Compact. Now, it lays out a number of things, and what you're telling us is that the things that are laid out in this letter were the things that were agreed between the two parties at the meeting in D.C. last week. Is that correct?
So this is a culmination of an effort that has been going on for 13 weeks. A negotiation, like I said, to try to move forward and have a positive outcome for the concession. Because like both parties, the U.S. government and government of Ghana has stated many times over, the concession is a very, very important part in creating a reliable energy sector, reliable energy to millions of Ghanaians, right, to the benefit of the people of Ghana. And so that letter is a result of those 13 weeks of negotiation. And that was a negotiation between mainly MCC and the Ministry of Finance. And that is the result of all those hard fought and hard discussed and collaborations that was between MCC and the Ministry of Finance.
So those 13 weeks of the negotiation include this last meeting in Washington, D.C.
Correct.
So I guess what I'm seeking to clarify here is that by the end of that meeting in D.C., these items laid out in the letter from the MCC, were these the items agreed on by both parties by the end of that meeting in D.C.?
Right, so like I said, this is the result of the negotiations. This was the pre-negotiated path forward, right? But until you get people signing on the dotted line, it's not final, as in any negotiation. So there was a period where they came to this pre-negotiated way forward, but then, the final decision makers, they have to sign so we can actually put into place what was laid out in the pre-negotiated agreement.
Right.
But that's when the government of Ghana decided to go a different way. And that's when we, of course, as a result, the government of Ghana produced their letter saying that their intent of terminating the concession. And then we noted with regret our position.
When was that decision to go a different way communicated to the MCC? Was it before or after that meeting?
It was communicated through that, the letter that media has also been mentioning. The government of
Written
Ghana.
by the finance minister of
Correct,
Ghana.
the one that said that they were going to terminate the concession.
So this was after that meeting?
It was in response to after they put together that determined way forward. Yes.
Yes. So
pre-negotiated.
So after the meeting, that's the reason why I'm trying to seek clarity here, because we know who from the Ghana side attended this meeting. We know the finance minister was there. We know that he was there with the president's executive secretary, among other officials. In fact, some of our sources are even telling us that our information minister was there. Is that accurate?
So I would have to get back to you on that one because
Okay.
I was here with you in Ghana.
Okay. So at least we know two of the people who represented the government of Ghana there. And so when we talk about the final decision makers, from our side, these two individuals would most certainly be amongst the final decision makers. So I'm trying to determine whether the position of Ghana's government was only made clear to the American side after this meeting, or whether during the meeting, these individuals who ought to be part of the final decision makers, whether they communicated to the MCC that Ghana intends to terminate the PDS contract.
Well, for that, I'll actually have to refer you to the government of Ghana when they decided to go a different way.
Okay. So the MCC was at that meeting. What was the position of the government of Ghana in that meeting?
Well, like I said before, they came to a conclusion, and the outcome was that pre-negotiated agreement. That was the only thing that was left to do, was to sign. And again, I'm not here to point fingers or to place blame. I'm just giving context to the letters that the media was made privy to.
Okay. All right. So we don't want ambiguity here.
Right.
We have details of what was laid out in the letter from MCC.
And Kojo, if I can make a point, sorry for cutting you. I just want to make the point that this was not an ultimatum, right? That's another piece of context I wanted to give, because that's what has the narrative that we've seen in the media. This was the culmination of 13 weeks of negotiations and collaboration with the government of Ghana.
Okay. So this is the letter. I'm going to read from it. This is the letter that was issued by the MCC after that meeting last week.
Well, when you say issued by the MCC.
Yes, written to the Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta.
Right. This is the pre-negotiated internal work product that I was mentioning.
That's right.
That was drafted together with the Ministry of Finance.
So this letter that I'm reading from was drafted together with the Ministry of Finance of Ghana.
Yeah, which is normal. That's normal in negotiations.
It is also important because I think it gives us even more context to what we've been hearing. We now understand what we've been hearing a bit better. So this is what the MCC, together with the Ministry of Finance, drafted. And I'm reading from it, so I quote, "In addition, the government acknowledges that time is of the essence and thus commits to effectuate the concession, restoration, and restructuring in accordance with the following principles to allow for sufficient time to enable completion by the compact end date of the infrastructure works and IT project implementation, which are planned to be funded with the compact tranche 2 funding." That's reference to the $190 million. So now I'm reading out what, according to this internal work product, what government of Ghana agreed with MCC. Maintain the framework and the terms and conditions of the existing transaction agreements unless otherwise agreed by all parties. Ensure at least the same level of investment commitment in the distribution sector as was committed to in the existing shareholders agreement. Maintain Meralco in its current roles of financial lead shareholder, operation lead shareholder, and developing country lead shareholder. And I'll read one more. Facilitate the equity participation of potential Ghanaian institutional investors in the transaction in a fair and transparent manner, while honoring the rights of the existing shareholders, the local ownership requirements, and the transfer restrictions of the U.S.A. So to wrap it all up in 2 sentences, this document, drafted by Government of Ghana and MCC, said that Meralco would be maintained, other shareholders would be maintained, but there would be the inclusion of some new shareholders to participate following due process. Have I got that right?
Yes, it's in the letter.
Okay. So as at last week, Friday, which I believe is when the meeting was held, the government of Ghana was going to maintain Meralco.
I mean, that's what was pre-negotiated, and that's what is in the letter, correct?
So when the American government received the letter from the finance minister saying, we're going to go another way, and it stated its reason, which was that the guarantee had been found not to be valid, was that not a good enough reason to cancel the PDS contract? Why did the Americans not agree?
That was the reason that the Ghanaian government gave. We, as the U.S. government, believe that the concession was valid and that the transfer was valid on March 1st, 2019. We find that the independent forensic audit found that that transfer was valid. So we stuck with that take on the matter.
Even though the company that is supposed to provide the guarantee said, we're not providing a guarantee. The Americans still felt that there was a guarantee?
Well, we believe that the independent forensic audit that was done stated that that guarantee was valid and that there was no, that the concession was valid, sorry, the concession was valid. So we chose to go with what the independent audit, we determined that the independent audit said, and that we wanted to move forward with this very important concession. So
from the American perspective, even though the company providing the guarantee says we're not providing it, the American MCC sees the concession to still be valid even without a guarantee.
Well, you're working on the assumption that there was no guarantee. What I'm saying is that the independent forensic audit stated that the transfer was valid March 1st, 2019. So that's what the U.S. government believes.
The U.S. government has the belief that there was a guarantee.
That there was a valid transfer, correct.
Which would mean that there was, correct, there was a guarantee, okay.
So that's why we noted with regret when the government of Ghana decided to go the way that it went.
Can you help me understand that? How does the American government see that there was still a guarantee even though the company to provide it said, we're not providing it?
So in these past 13 weeks, there was an independent forensic audit, and they were set out to figure out what went right, what went wrong with the transfer. And the way that we read the report that came out after that independent audit was that in the end, there was no reason to forsake the concession. There was a reason to stick with the concession because, in fact, the transfer was valid at the time of the transfer. So that's the position of the U.S. government. Of course, as I say, we note with regret the government of Ghana's decision, but you know, government of Ghana is a sovereign nation. They are entitled to make the decision that they made. And you know, we note it and we're ready to move on and continue to work with the government of Ghana. Because as you know, the compact is twofold, right? There's one is the the infrastructure to benefit the energy sector, and the other was the concession. So the infrastructure was the $308 million, which we still have, which is no small chunk of change, right? That we're going to continue to work with the government of Ghana and through MEDA to make sure that we create a more reliable energy network here to benefit millions of Ghanaians. So we're very still really poised to continue our work with the government of Ghana on that. So the only thing that's affected by the concession being terminated is that $190 million, which what I said in the beginning, the $190 million was for infrastructure that was state-owned, were going to be state-owned assets and not going to the concessionaire. That was contingent on a successful concession. And since the government of Ghana decided to cancel that concession, it was no longer successful. So we had to pull back that 190. But I did want to make it clear to the media and to the viewers that this is not the end of the compact. This was a termination of the concession, which is one part of the compact.
Okay, and we'll talk a bit more about what it means going forward in just a moment.
Sure.
Before that, though, you've mentioned that this document, the internal work product from the MCC addressed to the finance minister, is actually a document that was drafted by the finance ministry and the MCC.
Correct. It was joint, a collaboration.
This is not what has been communicated by the government of Ghana. So can you prove this? Do you have evidence that the finance ministry worked with the MCC to draft this document?
What do you mean? Well, I'll have to refer you back to the government of Ghana. I'm not privy to what they said about how this letter came about.
Right.
I'm just giving
what I'm saying is they
process.
have not said they drafted it alongside or with the MCC. They have not said that. What they have said was that they wrote a letter in response to it.
That's not saying that they didn't work together.
I know this, but they didn't say they worked together. So
Well,
I would like to ask where the evidence is. I mean, I don't see a signature on it of the finance minister.
So, Kojo, what you're saying is two different things.
Okay. You're
not saying that the government explicitly said they did not work on this pre-negotiated way forward. They never. You're not saying that they did not. You're saying that they did not refute that statement. That's what you're trying to say. But what you're really saying is that you have not heard from the government who drafted this document, because you weren't given context when you found this source document, correct?
And you are now giving us this context.
And now I'm now giving you that context.
So I'm asking, as part of that context, can you show us what it is that will prove that indeed the government of Ghana actually drafted this with the MCC? Because what I see here is a document on an MCC letterhead. It has an address, so there's an addressee. The addressee is the minister. And then there's a signature at the end of it. It was signed by Kaya Kim. K. Kim, forgive me.
It's okay.
And that is the only signature on the document. So what I'm asking is, how do we go to our government and say, hang on, this document that you are responding to, you actually helped draft it?
Well, so again, I'm not here to point fingers or place blame. What I'm here to do is to give context to to give context to the document that you had without any explanation. So like in any negotiation, when you come to the table in two parties, there's a lot of discussions and there's a lot of collaboration. And in order to get everything down in writing, it's usually a document is put together.
Right.
When you're in a negotiation, oftentimes one party is not writing, right, the document that's to be signed. And in order for it to be finalized, you need both sides to sign it so you can move forward. So it's set in stone, it's in writing, okay? I am not here to prove to you that both parties were in the room to write this document, okay? I'm just giving you context and background on how these past 13 weeks have gone, so that it can put it into a more clear view for yourself as you do your reporting and for the public, the Ghanaian public. So, like I said, it's normal for any negotiation for two sides to get together and create a document so that it can be set in stone.
Their response, which is the other document in the public domain, signed by the finance minister, saying that the contract was going to be terminated. And in that document, they made reference to meetings between the president and the CEO of the MCC, I believe in New York, where the Ghana government says that the president came to some agreement with the CEO of the MCC that they would terminate the PDS contract. Is this accurate? Or is that the understanding of the American government?
So what I'm gonna have to do, hold on, before I answer this question, you're a sound guy. You're meticulous. All right, so to your question, you're asking what happened between two parties in a conversation that neither of us were present. This is on the sidelines of UNGA, right? So I would have to refer you to MCC to get clarity on what was said on that meeting, if I may.
So the American government have not asked about it. You read the letter from the finance minister. Have you not checked with the MCC to see whether that is true?
I just don't want to speak for the MCC CEO. I would like to give him a chance. So if you...
Did he answer the American government when you asked him?
No, what I'm saying is
happened?
I'm referring you to MCC.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, let's also look at the other thing, which is assuming that there was indeed a problem with the guarantee, that Al-Qut was not providing the guarantee that they were supposed to be providing. Did the American government or the MCC, did they see a remedy to that which would not have negated the contract?
So we have to be careful here because I don't like dealing in assumptions. All I can do is state that after we received the independent forensic audit report, we reached the conclusion that the concession transfer was valid.
What was it in that report that led you to that conclusion?
Well, in the report, we're looking for two things. One, if there was any foundations of fraud, which there wasn't, and two, whether the concession transfer was valid, and it was. So that's what we were looking for.
The government of Ghana suggests that part of the payment for that guarantee was made by PDS after they started the concession, that they actually used funds from the operations of PDS after they started collecting revenue for electricity. They used some of those funds to pay for the guarantee which they were supposed to have before they took over the assets.
So for Kojo, for that one, what I'll have to do is I'll have to refer you to PDS for that, because you're talking about PDS.
What did the forensic report say about it?
So I think we're getting a little bit too far down in the weeds about what the report said and the conclusions. I think the main point that we need to really focus on is that at this point in time, the concession has been canceled and what that means. Because at this point, the decision has been made, and we are ready to move forward to continue to work with the government of Ghana to create a more reliable energy sector. And we're really focused on using that remaining $308 million to strengthen that sector.
Now, in the statement issued on Tuesday by the American government, in which you noted with regret the decision of the Ghanaian government, you made reference to the sanctity of contract, noting with regret that the Ghana government has cancelled a contract that the American government did not think needed to be cancelled. In fact, you called it an unwarranted termination. Noting that, does this affect the way the compact will be executed going forward? Does the American government now consider this ability of the Ghana government to cancel a contract that you don't think should be cancelled? Does that now become a factor in how you deal with the Ghanaian government? No,
not at all. I mean, to borrow a quote from the Ministry of Information's press conference that happened earlier this week, it's not a crisis of confidence, right? We're still committed to working together, especially since the compact is still in existence. We still have $308 million that we're going to put to good use in strengthening the energy sector, really dig into the energy infrastructure and build that up. And we're here to work together with the Ghanaian government for the betterment of the country of Ghana and her people. That's what we're here for. And that's why we're ready to move forward with the government of Ghana through MEDA to really make this happen, because it's very, very important that we keep committed and we stay focused at the task at hand and increasing the reliability of the energy sector here in Ghana.
So you're not concerned for the future, in spite of the fact that there could be unwarranted termination of contracts?
No, like I said, we remain committed to working with the government of Ghana with this compact to see this compact to fruition.
I'm hoping you can help me understand one of the items that was stated in the letter that was jointly drafted at that meeting last week. It says, and I'm going to quote it again, I read it earlier, maintain Meralco in its current roles of financial lead shareholder, operation lead shareholder, and developing country lead shareholder. Facilitate the equity participation of potential Ghanaian institutional investors in the transaction in a fair and transparent manner while honoring the rights of the existing shareholders, the local ownership requirements, and the transfer restrictions of the GSA. When I read this, my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, but my understanding is that there was an agreement at this meeting that the shareholding of PDS was going to change, that some potential Ghanaian institutional investors were to be added. Can you help us understand that?
Sure, I think it's pretty clear in what you just read, the points that were being made. But I just want to make it clear that this was the result of a lot of conversations, a lot of negotiations, because the concession was a very important part of the compact. And I think on both sides, we realized that we really wanted to try to make it work. And this is the result, what you just read. This is how we were going to get past the finish line to continue to do the good work that the concession was doing.
Why was there a need to restructure the shareholding and bring in new shareholders?
So I'm not going to really get into the nitty-gritty of what was pre-negotiated, because in the end, it didn't come to fruition.
But it is important for us, for accountability, to understand what led to this decision to change the shareholding structure of PDS. Why did that become necessary?
So like I said, the concession was a very, very important part of the compact. And in negotiations, you have to work together to come to a common, mutually beneficial conclusion so that we can move forward in a positive light. And so that is the result of talks between both the Ghanaian government and the U.S. government to get to that positive outcome.
Right. Now, you told us that the forensic audit determined that there was no reason for this concession to be cancelled, that it was valid. So if it was valid, if it was fine, why was there a need for the shareholding to change?
So what I will say is that the U.S. government, as we read the independent forensic audit report, believed that we had a valid concession. And so, but the loggerhead that we were reaching is that the government of Ghana did not have that same belief, and we needed to work through our differences so that we had a positive outcome. What you're referring to was how we were going to get to that point.
So how would
However, that in the end, that wasn't the plan that was agreed upon.
Okay, so help us understand that plan. How was it? How was the restructuring going to satisfy both parties?
Well, that was the way that they set forth to move forward so that we can actually have the concession be still in existence today.
That was the proposal of the Ghana government, is that what you're saying?
That was the joint proposal of both the Ghana government and the U.S. government.
Yes, so how was that supposed to solve the problem? New shareholders, how was that going to solve the problem?
What I'm saying is that in any negotiation, in order to get to the desired outcome, there are different things that both sides or either side would want to get to that positive outcome.
So who wanted new shareholders?
Who wanted new shareholders?
Which of the two sides wanted new shareholders?
So like I'm saying, like I said before, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty because we're dealing in like hypotheticals that we know are not going to happen.
Well, I'm hoping for a specific here. I mean, this is a specific action point in this document, and I want to understand it.
Right. I know, Kojo, that this is very important for you to understand, but what I really want the focus of this point in the conversation to be is that the point is we tried for 13 weeks to make this concession work. In the end, the government of Ghana decided to go a different way, which we note and that we are ready to move on and continue to work with the government of Ghana.
Okay, let's talk about the future.
Sure.
So the compact remains. The concession is gone.
Correct.
Right. So obviously you'll work together on how to execute the first tranche, the $308
million.
$8 million. Then what? Is there anything beyond that once that money is used and executed? What next?
So let's not downplay $308 million, right? I mean,
no,
that's
no,
a lot
not
of
at
money.
all. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I just want to look to the future because the $308
Right.
million is what you're working on now.
Well, the $308 million is the future, right? So the $308 million, that's going to go to needed upgrades in infrastructure. It's going to help millions of Ghanaians. It's going to create a more reliable energy sector here in Ghana, right? So that is affecting the future. The future is a more reliable energy network. The future is better economic prosperity for Ghana because of a more reliable energy network, right? So when we talk about the future, it's the same thing as the compact. We're dealing with the future now with the $308 million.
Of course, we're referring to Compact 2.
Correct.
Will there be a Compact 3?
So when you refer to a Compact 3, what exactly are you referring to?
Well, actually, I don't know if there will be one. What I'm saying is this is the second time we've had a compact with MCC. Will there be a third time?
So that's not up to me. It's a little bit above my pay grade. But that is up to the desire of the government of Ghana, the need. But, you know, let's focus on the $308 million that we have right now and what we're going to do to really benefit the lives of the millions of Ghanaians here right now.
Okay, and I mean, you have outlined what the plan is there to work together to make all of these improvements to the infrastructure for the betterment of Ghana. That is good.
Yes.
But of course, if what you're saying is that this recent development has not affected our relationship going forward, that is what gives birth to this question I'm asking of whether there will be a Compact 3. The MCC operates in many countries, across the globe, and I'm sure there are certain things that go into the decision to continue working with some countries and not to continue working with others.
Well, Coach, I think it's notable that Ghana's on their second compact. Not everyone gets a second compact. So I think that speaks to the confidence that the U.S. government has in Ghana and in the potential in Ghana. So I would like to focus on the now because the now is definitely going to affect the future. And we're really excited to dig into that $308 million and work with the government of Ghana through MEDA to really make this compact a success.
Some of the reporting and some of the communication from government has been that they stood their ground in this negotiation. Obviously, that has a certain connotation. You stood your ground. Perhaps you were being pressured to do something you didn't want to do, and you stood your ground. Is that an accurate reflection of how things have unfolded?
I think the context that I gave you and your viewers today puts a more nuanced view on it. I really want to hone on the fact that this was not an ultimatum. This was not an ultimatum, all right? We sat down, the U.S. government, with the government of Ghana to try to come up with an amenable solution. And since the beginning, since 2014, the $190 million was contingent upon a successful concession, right? And since the government of Ghana decided to terminate the concession, by that agreement, we had to pull back the $190 million. That's just how the agreement was laid out. There was no ultimatum, there's no pressure, it just is what it is. They made a decision, we noted it with regret, and that precipitated what happened next, which was the $190 million being taken back.
There are some who have the view that this whole thing with the guarantee was simply a pretext and that the government of Ghana wanted to cancel the PDS contract for reasons unknown. Was that the impression the Americans had as well throughout this negotiation?
Again, I don't like to deal in pretexts or hypotheticals or assumptions. I deal in facts.
So what is the fact? What was the Americans' view of why the Ghanaian government wished to terminate the contract?
So again, I'm going to have to refer you back to the government of Ghana for their view on that.
Well, they have shared it.
Right.
They suggest that it's because of Al-Qut.
Yeah, I'm referring you back to the government of Ghana because I don't want to speak for the government of Ghana. I don't want to suppose if they had any alternative. No, I don't want to do that. They stated why they did it, and we note that, and we're ready to move on together with the government of Ghana to complete the compact.
Naomi, this has been informative. You have given us a lot of context.
Good.
We certainly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Kojo.
Pleasure's mine.
And that was a great conversation. Kojo Yankson having that interaction there also puts to bed what the position of the U.S. government is with that interaction with the U.S. representative or the U.S. embassy right here. And it also will keep the conversation running on our various discussion platforms. And as always, Facebook is where we stream live. You can also make sure that your comments are there. We also have a Twitter handle at JoyNews on TV. And you can always be watching us live through My Joy Online TV on YouTube. But through myjoyonline.com, we'll get more of the updates, uploads, and stories emanating from this interaction.